So good afternoon and welcome back everyone. I hope you enjoyed a delightful lunch break and we are energized and ready to dive into the second session of our symposium. So honorable dignitaries and esteemed guests in the forum, in our upcoming session we will delve into the multifaceted dimensions of Pope Francis' profound teachings on the title of Church and the Public Space Towards Universal Fraternity. The distinguished speakers will bring to light diverse facets of Pope Francis' teachings, shedding light on the Church's profound responsibility in nurturing a sense of universal fraternity and addressing pertinent issues within the public sphere. At this moment, I have the honor of inviting and introducing Reverend Dr. Susiraj, who will be guiding and moderating this session. Reverend Dr. Susiraj's scholarly endeavors began with his ordination in 1995. Currently serving as the parish priest of the Holy Family Church in Ramamurthy Nagar, Bangalore, he brings with him a wealth of experience and knowledge. His academic accomplishments are truly remarkable, having obtained a doctorate in missiology from our esteemed St. Peter's Pontifical Institute. Dr. Susiraj's involvement as the ecclesiastical advisor to the Women's Commission in the Archdiocese of Bangalore highly appreciated. His teaching topics, the mission of the people of God, and basic ecclesial communities at St. Peter's Pontifical Institute are greatly loved by the students. His multifaceted roles, from pastoral care as a parish priest to his academic contributions and advisory roles, paint a picture of a committed and learned individual in Church's mission. So let us give him a warm welcome to Dr. Susiraj with a round of applause as he takes the reins to lead and moderate the session. Over to you, Father.
Thank you, dear Father. 3 o'clock is a time, spiritual time, they say, because this is the time a lot of people are praying divine rosary. And also 3 o'clock is a sleeping time. A lot of people are found to take some relaxation. That's why whenever we have a symposium, morning time you will find 100% attendance, and 3 o'clock they will find little difficult to come. Okay, you do understand. And now I have the honor of inviting Anthony Arulraj, who hails from Tenkasi, Tamil Nadu. He is an alumnus of St. Paul's Seminary, where he studied philosophy from 1976 and 1979 and theology between 1982 and 1986. And he obtained his BTH. He received his master's degree in political science from Madurai Kamaraj University. His faith led him to be actively engaged in social action, trained in human rights advocacy by the Asian Center for Progress of Peoples, Hong Kong. He worked as the advocacy officer with the Justice and Peace Commission of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India from November 2003 till November 2014. Since December 2014, he has been working as the advocacy officer and peace educator with the Jesuit Refugee Service of South Asia region. We cordially invite Dr. Anthony Arulraj to take up the stage, and we are really privileged to listen to you.
So, good afternoon, Reverend Fathers, Sisters, and other friends here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be standing here amidst you. And I am also, in a way, having a mixed feeling because my own professor is here, and with his blessings, I start this presentation. Father Felix was my professor, both when I was a student of philosophy and when I was a student of theology in St. Paul's, Trichy. Well, I wish to make a disclaimer at the very outset. The kind of title that's given me is not appropriate. So please understand I am not a doctor and I am not very particular about the titles. Okay? So simply call me Anthony or Anthony Arulraj. Well, thank you very much, Father Susaraj, for the introduction. And I have been asked to present this paper on Pope Francis' theology of mercy in his vision for migrants and refugees. Well, the only eligibility for me to stand here and make this presentation is that I have been working with refugees since 1992, especially with the Sri Lankan Tamil refugees. And now I work with Jesuit Refugee Service as the advocacy person for South Asia. So the Jesuit Refugee Service in South Asia works not only in India. In India, it works in Tamil Nadu among the Sri Lankan Tamil refugees, in the northeast among the refugees from Myanmar who are accommodated in Mizoram and Manipur, and also in Delhi. We have urban refugees based in Delhi, so JRS works with them too. And outside India, we have JRS presence in Afghanistan and also in Bangladesh. So I work as part of the regional team, South Asia regional team. So that's for my introduction, and that is where I see that my eligibility also stands. Well, I have drawn some insights from my own experience with the refugees, and I have also gone through certain documents that are authored by Pope Francis himself. Well, just to give the setting, first of all, we need to understand Pope Francis' idea of mission. As I understand his idea of mission, he means our mission is, or the church's mission is, not to proselytize, but to build the kingdom of God here on earth. So, and that kingdom has to be a kingdom of peace, a kingdom of justice, and a kingdom of mercy. So this is how Pope Francis redefines the concept of mission. And in his idea, this kingdom has to be informed, and it has to be also defined on the basis of mercy. And the mercy that Pope Francis talks of is nothing but the compassion of Jesus, which Albert Nolan in his book, Jesus Before Christianity, has highlighted. So, Nolan would say that the defining characteristic of Jesus was his compassion for the outcast, for the downtrodden, for the oppressed, etc. And the idea of mercy, or the theology of mercy that Pope Francis envisages, is something similar to the mercy or the compassion that Jesus displayed in his dealings with the people who were outcast, downtrodden, etc. And another point that is to be understood very clearly is this kingdom is an inclusive kingdom. It does not exclude anybody. So when we are thinking of our mission, we need to think of a mission, that mission of building a new kingdom, which is very inclusive, which does not exclude anybody. And this spirit is very manifest in all the official pronouncements and even informal pronouncements of Pope Francis. That's very obvious. And he insistently, he says, our society has to be inclusive. Our church has to be inclusive. We have to be all embracing. So that is the idea that Pope Francis underscores in all his pronouncements. And when we come to Pope Francis' messages and his gestures of solidarity with the people, the refugees and the migrants, we find that his theology of mercy has been put into practice very solidly. So that is something which we need to understand before we go on to understand why he did certain things and why his pronouncements always emphasized on what the church has to do to those people. Now, let me go on to highlight some of the gestures of solidarity that were performed by Pope Francis. There are many innumerable gestures, but I just take a few of them. One is his visit to Lampedusa. It's an island in Italy. You know that Pope Francis was elected and on 13th March 2013. But within months, already on July 8th, Pope Francis visited this island and he met the refugees. And the island, Lampedusa, has a special significance. Some of you might remember the picture of a child was blown to the shore, a dead child. Okay? That was at Lampedusa. So Lampedusa is a witness to the sufferings, the angst, and the agonies of the refugees and the migrants. And just within 5 months after his election, Pope Francis went there. It is a very significant gesture of solidarity. And he says, yes, I am with these people. He told them also, I am with you. And he just did not stop with doing something for them. He made a pronouncement, a prophetic pronouncement. It is there. Already in July 2013, Pope Francis condemned the globalization of indifference. He says, the world is indifferent to these people who need mercy, who need compassion, but the world responds to them in a very indifferent manner. And he says, it is not something limited to one particular country. It is globalized. So Francis says, this kind of globalized indifference should be responded to by the church with a globalized compassion, a globalized mercy. So that is the kind of solution that Pope Francis proposes to the problem of globalized indifference. So there he takes a stand. He takes a stand in favor of the refugees and migrants. And he also denounces a prophetic denouncement condemning the globalized indifference. And this terminology, globalized indifference, is repeated in many of his official pronouncements. If you go through them, you will find them. So his theology of mercy is definitely against the globalized indifference of this world. And the theology of mercy of Francis, Pope Francis, is something that urges us to respond to this situation of the migrants and refugees with globalized compassion. Then we see By September 2013, he visited another refugee center, which was managed by, which is still being managed by Jesuit Refugee Service. It is a place called Centra Astali. Okay. It is in Rome, and Pope has visited it even in February this year. So this is again a gesture of solidarity. He visited this center already in September 2013, and he visited the same center in February this year. Now, here also, he did not just stop with, being with them or having dinner with them, all that. He spoke there. There were about 900 people. And among them were not only refugees and migrants, there were religious nuns, there were priests, there were also staff of Jesuit Refugee Service. And what he said there are very, very significant and worthy of note even here today now. So just a few excerpts from his pronouncement. He says, how often, however, as in other parts, many people here who have international protection stamped on their stay permit are forced to live in distressing situations, at times degrading, and in no way are they able to start living a dignified life or to think of a new future. So here, with his compassionate heart, Pope Francis understands the plight of refugees and migrants. So he says it is a distressing situation. And he says these people have the stamp of international protection. See, to just put it in different words, there is United Nations High Commission for Refugees. In countries where the people seek asylum, the UNHCR, that's what is known as United Nations High Commission for Refugees, it comes to the rescue of the asylum seekers and gives them an ID card saying these are all refugees and they need special protection from the government. And Pope Francis says, in spite of having this stamp of international protection, their situation is pathetic. Now, having said that, he tells the audience, I think it is also applicable to us here today, show them that with acceptance and brotherhood, it is possible to open a window on the future, or rather, more than a window, a door, and even more, show them that they can also have a future. Just in the previous paragraph, he, bemoaned, saying that these people have no future. But he says, it's our responsibility to make sure they have a future. And he talks about the way that is possible. He says, by accepting them and accepting them as our brothers and sisters, we can make sure they have a future, a rosy future. Then, to the same audience, Pope Francis talks about solidarity. He says, it is a dirty word for the developed world. But for us, Christians, it is a very important word. And he says it is our word, a Christian word. I think solidarity is something which is upheld by the Pope's social teaching. This we call CST. So solidarity is something which the church has been always upholding. So that's why Pope Francis says it is our word. But he says it's a dirty word for the world, especially for the developed world. So now we need to ask ourselves, and please understand, solidarity is an expression of our compassion. Only people who have compassion will understand or will come forward to stand in solidarity with the people. Then he says, it is important for the whole church that welcoming the poor and promoting justice not be entrusted solely to experts, but be a focus of all pastoral care. So taking care of these people is not only to be done by some experts, but it is to be taken it to be the focus of all pastoral care of the church, of the formation of future priests and religious, and this place is one, and of ordinary work of all parishes, movements, and ecclesial groups. So, he says, welcoming the poor and promoting justice in their favor is the responsibility not simply of a few experts, but everyone in the church. And he says it has to be the focus of all our pastoral care, and it has to be the focus of the formation of future priests and religious, and it has to be the focus of all lay associations also. Then he says, I would like to ask religious institutions to interpret seriously and with responsibility this sign of the times. It's a very daring question and a daring statement Pope makes. He directly speaks to them, dear men and women religious, your empty convents are not useful to the church if they are turned into hotels and earn money. This is a phenomenon taking place in the Western world. Convents are presbyteries which are very vast. They have become empty. And the church, the people responsible, they think that they can just make money by converting such structures into hotels. But Pope is aware of all such tricks of the religious, and he says, no, that is not to be done. And he adds, the empty convents do not belong to you. They are for the flesh of Christ, which is what refugees are. Please see his perspective. The empty convents are for the flesh of Christ, the body of Christ, which is what refugees are. So he sees in the refugees and migrants the body of Christ. Not simply the mystical body, the flesh and blood of Jesus. And he says, your empty convents have to accommodate this flesh of Jesus. This flesh is nothing but the refugees and migrants. Please understand, see, he went to a refugee center, but look at the statements he makes. Very daring prophetic statements, pronouncements. And here, he talks about charity. Charity is another word for mercy or compassion. And he defines what true mercy or compassion should be. He says, charity that leaves the poor person as he is not sufficient. True mercy, the mercy God gives to us and teaches us, demands justice. It demands that the poor find the way to be poor no longer. So, the compassion that Pope Francis talks of, or his theology of mercy, is one that urges that our charity to the people should be transformative. It should transform the situation of the people. It should liberate those people from the oppressive situation. So this is something which we need to keep in mind. Then there is another gesture of Francis. He created a dicastery for promoting integral human development. So he merged a few councils, pontifical councils, and he made this. And a core or important component of this dicastery is a section on migrants and refugees. And this is managed by secretaries who are cardinals. And these people have to directly report to Pope. So please understand the kind of importance or significance that Pope Francis gives to this ministry of the church towards refugees and migrants. Then he washed the feet of the migrants on the Holy Thursday Mass on March 24th, 2016. This is again a solidarity gesture. And now let us come to certain official pronouncements. Now, the first one is an encyclical. It is known as Laudato Si. This terminology also has been taken from Saint Francis of Assisi. So, though Pope Francis is a Jesuit, he has drawn much from the spirituality of the Franciscans. And this word Laudato Si is taken from a canticle composed by Saint Francis of Assisi when he was at his deathbed. And that's known as the Canticle of Brother Sun and Sister Moon. And Pope borrows that terminology and uses it as a title for his encyclical. And here he talks about a kind of inclusive universe, cosmos, where the people have a safe place. People, especially the migrants and refugees, have a safe place. The next one is also Fratelli Tutti. It also talks about building a world based on fraternity, brotherhood. And he says here too, the migrants and refugees have to find a safe place, and this society has to be an inclusive one. And in his apostolic exhortations, I just mentioned a few of them which have great relevance for migrants and refugees. Evangelii Gaudium, then Amoris Laetitia, and Laudate et Exsultate, and yes, Laudate Deum. So, all this is the most recent one. And another thing that we need to remember is the series of Pope's messages for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees. I am not sure how many of us here know that there is something called World Day of Migrants and Refugees. Now, we have recently observed the 109th World Day of Migrants and Refugees, and we are waiting to witness the next one, the 110th. And since 2014, Pope has been contributing his messages. And all these messages have one underlying thing: mercy towards these people. An inclusive society, which is the kingdom of God. And he says, he gives a directive, a 4-point action to the church, which is also applicable to the world. He says, welcome, protect, promote, and integrate. So the holistic well-being of migrants and refugees are taken care of when this 4-point action plan is put into practice.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's right. I wind up here. I think the message has gone through. Thank you very much.
First and foremost, I want all of you to give your appreciation for Anthony Arulraj, especially for his dedicated service to the refugees in South Asia. And he has spoken about the mercy of God, which Pope Francis speaks from his practical experience. And he has said that Pope Francis imitates Jesus' mercy in his life as well as in his pastoral letters. And also he spoke about the globalized indifference which Pope Francis vehemently condemns, and he wants everyone to create a globalized compassion. And also he spoke about the plight of refugees, and as Pope wants the intervention of the international protection for the refugees. So I am really very happy that since Father has been working with refugees, he has got so much to offer. And I congratulate dear Anthony Arulraj for your paper. Wonderful paper. Wonderful paper. Thank you. Thank you very much. A word of request to the experts who are presenting. Kindly present the paper for 20 minutes. Now we have Dr. Arnold Mahesh Irudayadasan, a Salesian priest from the Salesian province of Trichy, has an MPH from Divyadan, an Institute of Philosophy, Nasik. He has obtained another master's degree in philosophy and religion from Madurai Kamaraj University. He has an MPhil degree and has obtained PhD in philosophy from the Catholic University of Leuven, Belgium, with a study on the ethics of human enhancement, a critical assessment of the pursuit of perfection. At present, he is the Dean of Philosophy in St. Peter's Pontifical Institute, and I request Father to present the paper.
Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I'm very grateful to the organizers, especially to Father Lawrence, for giving me this opportunity to present a paper in this symposium. So as you see, my paper is titled New Humanism of Pope Francis, Francis' Inclusive Vision of Fraternity in Fratelli Tutti. So in the relatively short span of his papacy, Pope Francis has had a profound and extensive impact on the world and the Catholic Church. While he has not changed anything in the core teachings of the Church, he has transformed everything through his message of mercy and promotes inclusion and integration. The Pope does not intend to overthrow the traditional teachings of the Church, but he has consciously created ample room for a flexible and accommodative interpretation of those teachings. He marches ahead with determination to reform, reshape, reconstruct the structure of the Church, the functioning of her institutions and her approach to the world. Being aware of the multifaceted context of the current world, the Pope exhibits openness and sensitivity. Given this, we contend that Pope Francis embodies the spirit of the Good Shepherd, characterized by inclusivity that goes beyond catering to the satisfaction of the majority, adhering to the way. This inclusive spirituality identifies those who are marginalized. Once identified, he acknowledges them, initiates dialogues by appreciating their differences, demonstrates a willingness to learn through attentive listening, and collaborates with all individuals to contribute to the betterment of the world. Against this backdrop, this paper seeks to delineate Pope Francis's inclusive vision of fraternity in the first part, remaining concurrently faithful to and extending beyond his encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti. The subsequent section substantiates his concept of new humanism by examining how this inclusive vision manifests as a mission of inclusivity, inviting us to reflect on various challenges that hinder the establishment of a more fraternal world. Pope Francis' inclusive vision of fraternity, new humanism of Pope Francis. First of all, a word on humanism. Humanism prioritizes the value and agency of individuals and humanity as a whole. This perspective underscores human interests, values, and dignity, emphasizing the potential and goodness of humans. Advocating for the development of capabilities, creativity, and well-being, humanism has a rich history. In humanism, the individual human becomes the central focus and pinnacle of existence. Regrettably, certain manifestations of humanism, driven by the desire to affirm the distinctive status of humans, have led to their isolation from the broader world and the diverse inhabitants of the universe, including flora and fauna, as Dr. Felix Wilfred quotes. By designating humans as the apex of creation and the master and possessor of nature, these expressions of humanism have allowed the exploitation and depletion of natural resources, posing threats to other earth inhabitants. New humanism of Pope Francis. Pope Francis is grounded in reality and not immersed solely in the abstract realm of Platonic ideas. In Evangelii Gaudium, the Pope registers, "I dream of a missionary option, that is, missionary impulse capable of transforming everything so that the church's customs, ways of doing things, times and schedules, languages and structures can be suitably challenged for the evangelization of today's world than for her self-preservation." Against this backdrop, we designate Francis's humanism as new due to its positioning of a human being within the interdependent relationship with the entirety of creation. This perspective regards human life and existence as beautifully interconnected with the earth and its destiny, conceptualizing individuals not in isolation but in communion. The immense network of relationships that develops human beings is perceived not as diminishing but as enhancing and redefining them, thereby establishing the foundations for a secure human future. This new form of humanism offers hope for the survival of not just humans but also all living creatures on earth. An additional fact of Franciscan New Humanism pertains to Pope Francis's acute recognition of the imperative to reform and realign interpersonal dynamics through love, justice, and a spirit of compassion. Pope Francis contends that a technology devoid of empathy, a power-driven political liberalism, and a profit-centric economy are inadequate for the well-being of both humans and the environment. Such perspectives neglect the affective dimension of love as a pivotal force, fostering unity, cohesion, and harmony. In Pope Francis's view, all human relations must derive inspiration from love and concern for others, grounded in divine love as an unwavering point of reference. He steadfastly asserts that any genuine humanistic framework cannot be constructed upon the absence of a transcendent divine presence. In this context, Dr. Felix Wilfred underlines the dynamic and contextual nature of Pope Francis's faith and theology, which is expressed through his profound involvement with the concerns of people, particularly those on the margins. That is why Pope Francis's New Humanism is rooted in the Christian tradition and open to all people of goodwill and envisions a more just, equitable, and sustainable world, characterized by Christ-centeredness, the dignity of every human person, a commitment to the common good, bold reforms within the church, its life, and established structures such as the Roman Curia, openness to all individuals, solidarity with the poor and marginalized, support for education and human development, care for the environment, and the promotion of dialogue and cooperation. This new humanism presents both a formidable challenge and a compelling pursuit. Grounded in the love of God and neighbor, this humanism aims to construct a better world for all. One could even say that the Franciscan New Humanism invites us to new ways of being human and Christian, revolutionizing leadership and innovative paradigm. Pope Francis embodies a novel understanding of leadership that has garnered global attention. Moral leadership necessitates a harmonious integration of two seemingly conflicting roles. On one hand, leaders must distinguish themselves within the group by being firm, strong, courageous, decisive, impartial, inclusive, insightful, well-informed, and capable of facing criticism. On the other hand, they must identify with their followers through humane understanding, empathy, compassion, active listening, patience, forgiveness, and openness to learning. Examining the leadership of Pope Francis, one can affirm that he possesses the skill of harmonizing these two unavoidable traits in the mold of Jesus and his patron saint Francis. Pope Francis's leadership has been appraised by diverse individuals in various ways. Some perceived him as a reactionary, while others regarded him as a revolutionary. Some struggled to define him, and a few considered him a complex and ambivalent personality. Adding to the intrigue, Cardinal of Cologne remarked immediately after Pope Francis' election, "He will surprise us all." As a leader, Pope Francis not only identifies himself as a man of the border, but actively seeks out those on the margins. With this new model of leadership, Pope Francis is leading the church into a new era, one that is more open to change and more inclusive, giving importance to the tradition of breakthrough. harmony in action, rebuilding through inclusive outreach. Being saddened by the current fragmented status of the world, Pope Francis strongly feels the need to respond to the divine invitation to rebuild the society. The Pope's all-embracing attitude springs from the life of Jesus, who touched the lives of everyone despite their differences. Jesus never promoted discrimination, the us and they in his life. This all-embracing approach of Jesus is the driving force behind the inclusive leadership of Pope Francis. Could a Catholic be an exclusivist when the Pope exhibits conspicuous efforts to come together with the people of other religions to pray for peace and other interventions, as Dr. Amaladas asks? The Pope displays the possibility of living together meaningfully, exercising mutual esteem and fairness, acknowledging and appreciating the differences as a source of enrichment and never a breeding ground of conflict. We should not let our differences become the cause of conflict, dispute, or an inhospitable distance between us. Openness to mutual enrichment is not only prudent, but also wise, because no thought is too rich to avoid being complemented by others, and no thought is too poor to contribute to the complementing of others. That is why the Pope encourages dialogue. Pope Francis's inclusive mission of fraternity. 1. Relationality includes the excluded. Today's world is torn by various discriminatory factors leading to intolerance. Such a narrow worldview will perpetuate the feeling of we, they, and insiders, outsiders. In such a context, the Pope clearly reveals his mind that human beings are essentially relational beings. We need to help each other. The other is not a number, and we all need each other. We need to have a heart that is compassionate and merciful towards everyone, especially the poor and the marginalized. Thus, the Pope encourages us strongly to go to the periphery and find God at the margins. Our God is bigger than our little way of seeing things. He is not afraid of margins. If we go to the periphery, we shall certainly find him. Mercy is God's name. We have seen in the previous presentation, so I skip this. Dialogue is a medium. Pope Francis has identified dialogue as a crucial medium of creating constructive relationship at all levels. Every dialogue entails speaking and listening, as each party has their own version of truth to narrate. From the view of the Church, she and the others are better understood through interreligious dialogue and know the religious experience of non-Christians and to give up their triumphalist language. Pope Francis asserts that such a language with an open attitude expresses our duty both to value our own identity and that of others and our courage to accept the difference. Someone who is different from us need not be our enemy. Thus, following our Lord Jesus and his patron St. Francis, the Pope deliberately bypasses confrontation and initiates an engaging dialogue as a means of resolving conflict. 4. Break barriers to build bridges. In today's mission, we create barriers easily when there is misunderstanding of or difference of opinion. The Pope, however, makes an appeal not to build walls but to bridges. For him, building walls refers to a mentality of responding to evil with an evil, but to defeat evil with good, because those refusing to build bridges are not Christians. There is no end to the building of a country's social peace. Rather, it is an open-ended endeavor, a never-ending task that demands commitment. Fratelli Tutti provides valuable guidance for this expedition. Francis advocates a culture of encounter, urging us to be attentive to others, embrace differences, and extend hospitality, particularly to those in need, echoing Ricoeur's emphasis on recognizing the presence of the other within us. The ultimate frontier of personal identity emerges when confronted by the presence of the other, compelling a reconfiguration of the subjectivity based on love. A church for the poor. The option for the poor should not lead us to friendship with the poor. Pope Francis is actively working to advocate the spirit and heritage of Vatican II, directing renewed attention towards working together for the eradication of poverty from the face of the earth. The twin dynamics of Pope Francis are identifying himself with Christ the poor and identifying himself with Francis of Assisi. He dreams of a poor church for the poor. It is to these that all Christians and the church must go forth from our own comfort zone in order to reach all the peripheries. Without this accompaniment with the poor, our interventions for the poor would contradict our intentions and hinder them from making their aspirations heard. Be responsible stewards of our common home. We have seen this morning, so I am not going to delineate this point. At the same time, it would be necessary to free the planet from the bonds of purely human-centric approach by taking cues from Michael Serres, who exhorts us to re-articulate the sovereignty over nature. In essence, the statement suggests a close alignment between the values expressed in Laudato Si and Serres' concept of naturarchy, emphasizing the active role of nature in our society. This perspective advocates for nature to be viewed not merely as a backdrop to human existence, but as an engaged and essential partner in shaping our societal dynamics. Consequently, the notion of autoarchy needs to be replaced by naturarchy, reflecting a shift towards a new humanism that resonates with the natural contract proposed by Serres. Due to our parasitic relationship with the nature, we have caused considerable ecological damage. This predicament necessitates a new transformative force to counteract it. Potential forces include the impending climate change and the like. Elements such as water, soil, plants, and animals may reclaim their spaces from the current developmental encroachment. Now, perhaps, as the Serres suggests, we should position ourselves neither at the center nor at the pinnacle of evolution, but instead create a biogeia to establish a level playing field for all the creation. Within the biogeia framework, we must put an end to the power dynamics resembling the game of masters and slaves. Next, the Global Compact on Education. Pope Francis, recognizing global education challenges, endorsed Together to Look Beyond, which is not a blueprint but an invitation to collaborative dialogue for a fairer world and a better future through education. So what are some of the 7 commandments? Human persons at the center, listen to the voice of the young, encourage women's participation, empower the family, welcome the most vulnerable and the marginalized, innovatively understand economy and politics, safeguard our common home. To actualize the new alliance with nature, which we have already discussed, we need a new cosmo-literacy. Next, integrating the immigrants we have seen in the previous paper, so I leave it. Conclusion. Based on the discussion hitherto, we could assert that the Pope champions an approach of openness and inclusion to heal and rebuild the church and society. The Pope characterizes our current era as one marked by fluidity and gaseousness. Consequently, there is a necessity for a new humanism to begin in Jesus Christ. The centrality of Jesus Christ is vital because it is in him that we encounter the genuine essence of humanity. Hence, we need to revert to being ordinary human beings living in harmony with nature, recognizing it as an intersubject. Put differently, a new figure of the human is emerging in Pope Francis's new humanism that encompasses the inclusion of the impoverished, embracing evangelical poverty, fostering dialogue, and promoting encounters. Love serves as the connecting thread among people. Collaborative initiatives should extend beyond Catholics, involving all individuals of goodwill in the pursuit of shared projects. For Pope Francis, the existence of every individual is deeply tied to that of others. Life is not simply time that passes, life is a time for interactions. This leads to an immersion in the world marked by fragility and misery, where distinctions of race, culture, and nationality make no difference in this shared human experience. The outcome is not adherence to a moral norm, but rather a clear recognition of the essence of human life, that is love. To realize this, Pope Francis motivates us to be open to learn from one another, and he dreams of a church that not only speaks and teaches, but also listens and learns. Hence, let us think and act along with the Pope to make our church a home and our earth a common home. Thank you.
Congratulations, dear Reverend Dr. Arnold Mahesh. Yes, our church is a home and our earth a common home. You began with the ideas of Pope Francis, who wants to reform, reshape, and reconstruct the structure of the Catholic Church. And also, you have pointed out that most of the time, in his teaching and in his action, he wants to identify himself, and also he is inviting others to the marginalized. So identify oneself with the marginalized. And also you have spoken about Pope Francis' teaching is grounded on reality rather than Platonic ideas. Yes, of course it is. And all human relations must derive inspiration from love and concern for others, especially those in the margins. Now you have given us where to find God. So, as Pope Francis has said, go to the periphery to find God. Don't build walls, but rather build bridges. Such a wonderful, a thought-provoking paper. And I'm really very honored to listen to Father. Thank you very much, dear Father. Now we have Reverend Dr. Nyana Patrick. Dr. Nyana Patrick, formerly professor and head of the Department of Christian Studies, University of Madras, holds a doctorate in Christian Studies. He served the University of Madras as Dean Endowments, Dean Student Affairs, Dean Research, and as chairperson of the School of Philosophy and Religious Thought. 13 research scholars have successfully completed PhD, and 6 more are continuing their research with his guidance. In the year 2013, he was awarded Nehru Visiting Lecturer Fellowship and taught a course on public religion, learning from Indian and American experiences at the Divinity School, Harvard University, USA. He has released a number of books, especially in Tamil, Poduveli Iraiyal, Public Theology, Indian Concerns, Perspectives and Issues, and number of books he has written, and also he has published 104 research articles and served as the chief editor of the Indian Journal of Christian Studies from 2011 to 2015. He has presented research papers in 87 international and national conferences and seminars. We have such a wonderful person here, a great theologian. Welcome, dear Father.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Susiraj, for introducing me. And thanks to Dr. Father Anthony Lawrence for inviting me to present a paper here on the topic Pope Francis and Political Engagement, a Public Theological Model. The word public is very, very public. Everyone knows it, isn't it? So, what is new in that word public? It is actually Professor Dr. Felix Wilfred who introduced the new meaning to this concept called public. It is different from the way we generally, casually use the word public. So what exactly it means, you must listen to me. And you must also buy a book which is there of Felix Wilfred for a socially engaged faith. He has a chapter on public theology. He has also many other books. Okay, so my paper is going to dwell upon the different aspects that Pope Francis shares of a public theologian. The ecclesiastical leadership today in India is kind of in a predicament, you know. When it comes to political engagement, we certainly cannot have what is called a direct political engagement. The church is a minority, and generally it does not go for a direct political engagement like involving in party politics and things like that, isn't it? But it cannot also keep quiet. It cannot be indifferent to the political or public sphere, because our faith is, as Professor Felix would say, it's socially engaged faith. It is something that seeks to impact upon the society, impact upon the public world. So how does one go about it? Can Pope Francis show some light on how we can go about our political engagement is the question. There are many models of political engagement by religious leaders today, starting with direct engagement, say for example as it happens in politics where religions are established at the state level. It may go up to the other end of openly proscribing political engagements, but yet wielding political power on various counts. I argue that Pope Francis' model of engaging in politics shares important aspects of a public theological model. It may be said to fall in between the two above mentioned models. This model does not establish itself as a power at the state level, and therefore it respects the autonomy of the political sphere. But at the same time, it does not abdicate its responsibility towards the noble cause of politics. Pope Francis' papacy does not argue for political establishments of religion. Of course, being a head of the Vatican, he is an exception that has come out of the historical necessity, but yet argues for a robust political involvement in civil society for the common good, a sublime value deeply embedded in the Catholic social teaching. My paper starts identifying the public theological dimensions in Pope Francis, goes into the kind of political engagement advocated by the words and deeds of the Pope, and concludes by discussing the value of the Pope's public theological model to our contemporary world. A distinction is generally made in the realm of Christian public theology today between public theology per se, that is, establishing or demonstrating the publicness of theology, and second, theology of public life, that is, theologizing upon concerns and issues impacting public life. Being a public theologian per se would mean to theologize upon the publicness of theology on existential questions which relate faith in a transcendental God as valid and meaningful to human life, taking on questions emerging from the provenance of the secularist thought. Here, being public would imply an affirmation of the validity of theological knowledge to be true and meaningful discourse of an important dimension of human life. Being a theologian of public life, on the other hand, in a subtle different sense, locates one within different particular traditions, faith, religion, spirituality, different traditions, and it inspires to speak validly about concerns, issues, problems, etc., which one perceives as impacting upon the collective life of humanity. This position goes with the contemporary linguistic realization that we are all irreversibly located within our own traditions, and that we humbly acknowledge the givenness of our locatedness within particular traditions. It would demand the epistemic virtue of being radically mutual by way of being open to conversations with other knowledge systems in an open public sphere. It would mean that one, even while being convinced of one's own faith claims, is ready to meet with others dialogically in an open space of knowledge. As a public theologian per se, Pope Francis argues for the validity and the need of the role of faith in a transcendental God in our contemporary context, certainly the way Catholic faith approaches God. It is an argument that counters the sway of the extreme forms of secularist modernist ethos as manifest, for example, in reducing religion to social, psychological, economic, and political factors. This reductionism has been there for a few decades, even for centuries, which we all know. The document on human fraternity for world peace and living together argues for reawakening the religious awareness among young people so that future generations may be protected from the realm of materialistic thinking and from dangerous policies of unbridled greed and indifference. The document goes further to say that the declaration may be a witness to the greatness of faith in God that unites divided hearts and elevates human soul. Then the well-known encyclical Fratelli Tutti calls the Church to reawaken the spiritual energy that can contribute to the betterment of society. The most recent apostolic constitution, Predicate Evangelium, too speaks about the primary service of the Church to every individual and all humanity, to once again awaken in all people the hearing of faith and bring the supernatural gift of faith as a light for our way, guiding our journey through time. Awakening the faith, reawakening the spiritual energy, and reawakening the religious awareness are phrases used by the Pope to emphasize the validity and the need of faith for our generation. It is in place to bring to our attention the perspective in which some contemporary public theologians understand the public theological dimensions in Pope Francis. Alfredo Dexeria and others argue that Pope Francis' writing point to a new theological epistemology which could be taken as a rupture anstratrice, as in the words of Michel de Chateau, making a founding rupture with Christian theology's long-standing confinement of self-referentiality. In their words, the current Catholic pontificate may be understood as a movement of instaurational rupture in favor of a public theology dynamic. The Pope has been seen as pointing to a theological epistemology which goes forth by moving out of its self-referentiality to dialogue with contemporary culture. It is a public theological going forth, going out of a self-referentiality to which Christian theology apparently subjected itself to while encountering the modernist secularist paradigm. Thus, by endeavoring to overcome the public-private binary and arguing for the publicness of faith, Pope Francis shares significant aspects of public theology today. And as a theologian of public life, the Pope engages with contemporary concerns of common good, which we have heard already, and I'm sure you have also heard in the sessions in the morning. Some of the very visible ones are alleviation of poverty and the security of the poor, safety of migrant and refugees, dignity of women, protection of children from abuses, ecological concerns, dialogues, and so on and so forth. So these are all examples that he is an effective theologian of public life. I'm sure you got some idea of the distinction between public theologian per se and being a public theologian of public life. Now, let me specifically go into his vision of politics, which arises from both dimensions. The Pope discusses the relevance and the value of political commitment in such terminologies as political charity, noble politics, etc. In Fratelli Tutti, he calls for a renewed appreciation of politics as a lofty occasion and as one of the highest forms of charity. This encyclical openly speaks of the necessity of the political participation of churches when it says, the church, while respecting the autonomy of political life, does not restrict her mission to the private sphere, On the contrary, she cannot and must not remain on the sidelines in the building of a better world. And the next number reiterates the political commitment by clarifying the role of church ministers and the laity by saying, it is true that religious ministers must not engage in the party politics that are the proper domain of the laity, but neither can they renounce the political dimension of life itself, which involves a constant attention to common good and a concern for integral human development. The church has a public role over and above her charitable and educational activities. Thus, we see the dimensions of a public theologian visible in the documents issued by the Pope. He speaks of the primary duty of every individual who value freedom to take politics seriously at local, regional, national, and global levels, and instructs everyone to have the virtue of charity at the heart of one's political activity, so as to remain anchored in justice, equality, mutual respect, sincerity, honesty, and fidelity. In Laudato Si, he speaks of the special virtue of political charity as a form of love overflowing with small gestures of mutual care, and spreads as social love through the veins of society to create a culture of care which permeates all of society. It breaks open the individualist mindset expressed in spirit of openness to everyone and takes in deep awareness of the society and expresses itself in action for the common good. In his message to the 52nd World Day of Peace in 2018, the Pope titled his address as "Good Politics is at the Service of Peace," and went on to say that politics is an essential means of building human community and institutions, and if exercised with basic respect for the life, freedom, and dignity of persons, political life can indeed become an outstanding form of charity. The Pope is aware that the politics these days is not respected well because of several vices like corruption, dishonesty, infidelity, etc. But he takes care to affirm that we cannot exist without the great contributions of politics. Can our world function without politics? Can there be an effective process of growth towards universal fraternity and social peace without sound political life? Are his very pointed questions. It is interesting to see how the Pope relished quoting a Vietnamese cardinal who spoke of the beatitudes of a politician in the following way. It's good that you also keep repeating this. Blessed be the politician with a lofty sense and deep understanding of role. It is not his, her role also. That's why I put sick. Blessed be the politician who personally exemplifies credibility. Blessed be the politician who works for the common good and not his or her own interest. Blessed be the politician who remains consistent. Blessed be the politician who works for unity. Blessed be the politician who works to accomplish radical change. Blessed be the politician who is capable of listening. Blessed be the politician who is without fear. This is what the Pope quotes. So the Pope's feel for politics is positive and energetic. It propels the recipients of the message into political commitments for the greater cause of common good. Furthermore, his invitation for active and responsible citizenship adds to his character as a theologian of public life. He reminds us, let us not forget that responsible citizenship is a virtue and participation in political life is a moral obligation. He explains the concept of citizenship is based on the equality of rights and duties under which all enjoy justice. It is therefore crucial to establish in our societies the concept of full citizenship, which is part of the duty of a public theologian. Now, for considering the time factor, let me go into the way his contribution can be situated in the political world today, especially in terms of the political theories that are there. Go into the slide on discussion. Pope Francis' synthesis of the liberal and communitarian visions of common good. Today, the dominant political theories witness a crucial debate between the proponents of liberalism and communitarianism. The liberal tradition, as we know, begins with arguing for the freedom of the individual endowed with inviolable rights so as to pursue independent initiatives for self-fulfillment and social development. It values individual autonomy and deters any interference from outside. That is liberalism. Liberalism has now grown to neoliberalism and all those things, you know that, no? But today, there are also a group of political philosophers who have begun to speak about the need of communitarian political theories, wherein, first of all, we accept that we are all embedded in different communities. We cannot extricate ourselves from the communities, and the traditions which have values, those traditions must be highlighted and their values must be brought to the public domain for the common good. So, synthesis is being kind of attempted by different scholars. Some of the Catholic and even Christian generally, public theologians do endeavor to bring a synthesis between these two. I find that, you can go to a few slides after. At this juncture, the Pope's oar orients us towards a meaningful and contextual synthesis by way of critically integrating the liberal values with the communitarian framework. It underscores the importance of human dignity, human rights, etc., together with the need of a communitarian framework which respects differences and diversity in a polyhedral model. I wonder whether you have noticed this particular concept called polyhedral model, which the Pope is speaking. It takes us beyond the neoliberal individualism on the one hand and narrow sectarianism, sectarian communalism that we experience today on the other. I think the Church in India has to work for this kind of a synthesis from a public theological perspective. The ecclesiastical leadership in India has to have an active engagement in public sphere today. There is a certain tendency among some sections of Indian ecclesiastical leadership to withdraw or shy away from the public sphere. It is not so much a result of personal preferences as a habitude induced by various historical factors, including some of our spiritual beliefs and outdated theological orientations. Among the many, that Indian Christians had been depending on the Western missionaries for their resources, spiritual, financial, etc., for a very long time could be a main factor or major factor that isolate Indian ecclesiastical leadership from the Indian public sphere, or that the Indian Christians came to be counted among the minorities in the independent India could be yet another socio-political factor that inhibits public intervention. Or even the spiritual beliefs that our kingdom is not so much of this world as the eternal one could also have cast its shadow on our public propensities and produced certain modesty, quote unquote, modesty in not venturing into the political or public sphere. In the Catholic Church, clerical domination could also have inhibited the laity from engaging the public sphere. Whatever be the historical reasons, we need active engagements in public sphere today. Our leaders, after the model of Pope Francis, have to be public theologians as well as theologians of public life in India today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Jnana Patrick. Your paper is really very, very important for us to reflect, especially with regard to public management, engagement, political engagement. And you have said that church, being a minority, cannot go for direct political engagement, but we can not simply keep quiet stating that since we are minority, we can't enter into political sphere. So you have given Pope as a model, and you have given a lot of models for political engagement. And also you have spoken about how to engage in a political field. And you have to ask all of us to take politics seriously at local, regional, national, global levels, as Pope Francis has pointed out. Now, you also pointed out that politics these days is not respected well because of several vices like corruption, dishonesty, infidelity, etc. And also you have pointed out how Pope is appreciating the political leaders who have committed themselves to contribute for the common good. So, wonderful paper. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking that you will be a right person to address the politicians so that they can get something, the gospel message, so that all of us can live in peace and harmony, in brotherhood, which is somehow in India is not so much found. So congratulations, dear Father. Wonderful paper on political engagement. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now it's the turn of the audience to ask any question.
Thank you, speakers, for the wonderful presentations. In the afternoon, we were happily led by the themes of social concern. I was so much taken up by the question of migrants. Actually, the reception of the migrants is a real challenge before me, because I often find in a very evangelical manner this is to be done, and this is the mind of the church, and this is the will of God also as well. I acknowledge that. But at the same time, certain bad experiences that we have from the migrants, from the refugees, maybe those who enter into an asylum in the pretext of a refugee, they commit certain social evils. They are much involved in the certain social evils, because of which we are a bit reluctant to welcome them in the proper way. I think this is a major challenge. Father Mahesh was just pointing to, although he has not developed that point, the integration of the migrants in the community. I think because of that problem, the hosting community would not be in a position to welcome them and integrate them into the mainstream of the life of the community. What do you think, beloved Mr. Anthony, about this?
Thank you very much for raising this question. Well, I think this is the kind of perspective that is commonly shared by many people. The civilians, even the political leadership, they have this perspective. But I wish to point out that this perspective is at loggerheads with the perspective that Pope Francis puts forth. He says you have to understand them. You have to welcome them, irrespective of our expectations. Okay? And one thing, having worked with refugees, what I would like to bring to our attention is this. We have to understand their situation. Very often, they come from a situation of conflict, where they are forced to move from their own land. And they are cut off from their roots, and they are kept not in the mainstream, but at the margins, at the border, for years and years on. For your kind information, the Sri Lankan refugees who came and took asylum in India, in Tamil Nadu, they have been kept in the camps for 40 years without integration. And keeping them like this will really provoke them. And they feel, they don't belong here, and they belong nowhere. And though we are part of a church which has accepted us, and through baptism and the other sacraments, we are helped to grow, we are not that pure or holy. And we expect the other people who come from a conflict situation, they are survivors of violence. They are not agents of violence, they are survivors of violence. But very often we are given to think, even the governments always try to portray them as terrorists, armed militants, and they are people who are, have the tendency to violence, all that. But this is the common perception of refugees and migrants. And Pope Francis invites us to a higher realm and have a different perspective, a reshaped perspective, which will help them understand, accept. They will have to welcome them. You just take a family. When a child is not accepted in the family, that will be a problem child. But when we accept a child, the child becomes, part of the family and it grows. So integration is necessary. Integration is a right. Pope Francis says it's a right, their right. It's not that we do or dole out of mercy. It is their right. And it is a violation of rights to keep them without integration for decades together. So that's my humble response to your question.
Last year I presented a paper only on migrants, and the question that you raised that also was there in my mind. And in one of the group discussions I presented this imagery. Immigrants coming to our country or our state can be compared to unknown people entering our homes, and they begin to cook what they like and the way they like, and they dress in the way they used to. Also they worship their own gods in their own way, maybe loudly and maybe untimely worship, etc. Surely any immigrant or any refugee who is coming to our home will be a disturbance in the beginning. Surely it is not going to create a peace immediately. And for that we need a wider home that is created not by mere physical space alone, but we need a wider mind and a wider heart. And is that easy? It's not easy. It is difficult, and it is going to bring a lot of challenges. And we need to also think how we Indians and South Indians are also in a way migrants in so many other countries, and we take take pride in that, etc. So when we have these two perspectives in our mind, it would be easier for them to understand, if not accept them. That's my view.
Congratulate all the speakers for your wonderful presentation. It was really very thought-provoking and very dense and very rich. It is too rich for my mind. And what I want to say is, see, we have to speak we have the commitment to speak the truth, and we have to speak the truth to the power. We have to involve ourselves in politics. We are part of it, or even Pope Francis says politics. Without politics, how can the world exist? We have to maintain order. So we are part of that. Politics is part of us. Now the question in India is coming to India. At present, the present regime, especially the present regime, as long as the regime is led by truth and justice, well and fine. But presently it is not so. We know under this BJP regime, forget Christians, even Hindus themselves, who spoke the truth, they are all they are anti-nationals. They speak the truth means they are against the government, against the politics. And they are anti-nationals, they are put in prisons. We know how many journalists are put in prisons. There is no freedom of speech, and there is no even judiciary. It's difficult. You can rarely think of getting, very difficult to get justice in India. And we know what happened to the very truthful who stood for justice and truth, DIG, but for the past 20 years he is in jail in Gujarat. And we have seen how Father Stan Swami, entire life, he stood for truth and justice. He served the poor, the tribals, and till his last moment, he stood for truth. He spoke truth to the power, but what the power did to him? Power made him systematically, led him to martyrdom. So in this scenario, now the question is in the present scenario, especially in India, present scenario. So how can we deal with it? We want to speak the truth. It is difficult for us. At the most line, we have to be you have to be ready for martyrdom only. That's what I feel. So what do you say? Anybody answer, please.
The question that is related to Dr. Jnana Prakash, because he has spoken about Pope Francis and political engagement, can you please enlighten us?
Hello. I think the question is addressed to everybody. It is not only to me. So everybody is rightly called upon to reflect over it. She has actually reflected it very well. I share the anguish that she has expressed, the kind of predicament that we all have. My only observation is that the predicament need not lead us to pessimism. Leading or getting into pessimism would mean a very active community getting into a kind of a silent mode, and also it can, generate negative energies even without our being aware of it. So there could be extreme tendencies from among us bursting forth. So I think we need to really tackle this kind of anguish that we all have. How do we tackle it, or how do we go about it? The best way that even Pope Francis intones is go to the grassroots. Don't bother about the power that is at the top. You see? So go to the grassroots. He speaks about people's theology, or theology of the people. He believes that people can solve problems. So therefore, let us for some time, let us not bother about what is coming from top, but something that we have omitted in doing is, in spite of having education institutions with us, we have not prepared people for public interventions. In the public sphere, there are so many forums where people speak, but you don't find the Christian voice. So there is an irony. There is some kind of we don't understand. How come that a community which has gained, or it has taken in the formal education for more than 3 centuries, has not produced individuals who can vocalize their concerns, their values in the public sphere? Something has gone wrong with us, because our deep consciousness is still out of the Indianness. Others have been accusing us, but let me also join in with that. You see, many of us in the seminaries don't study the Indian history or the cultures of India fully. We are experts on our what we call the Western theologies. So therefore, when it comes to a real issue, a dispute, nothing comes immediately, spontaneously from within us, because we are not rooted. Our consciousness is isolated consciousness. Indian Christian consciousness is isolated consciousness. So let us do something to make that consciousness rooted in this soil. Our people will take care of it. The way Muslim women interact in the public? So bold and very clear. Because they think that this is their country, there is no other go. But we have been always thinking we have some other place to go. That's the problem. Let us take this fact head on and say that this is our country. This is our religion. Indian Christianity is not a Western Christianity. So let us study the Indianness. Let us study the Indian philosophers. Let us study the Indian historians and interact with them. Help people to interact with them. Then I'm sure the grassroots will answer the kind of predicament that we are facing today. Thank you.
As a concluding remark, I would appreciate the hard work and the reflection that is shared with all of us, especially Anthony Arul Raj, who spoke about how we need to be merciful towards migrants and refugees. And also we appreciate Reverend Dr. Arnold Mahesh, for speaking to us about new humanism of Pope Francis, which is inclusive vision. And we are really very honored to listen to Dr. Jnana Patrick for your wonderful paper on public theological model for ecclesiastical leadership in India. We really had a good time. Thank you for all the scholars, for your contribution, and we are really indebted to you. Thank you. God bless you.